The odds of you being on Earth is about 1 in 400 trillion. When you take into account the number of times that life on this planet was almost completely wiped out or on the brink of mass destruction, those odds get a lot worse. We never really think about it, but the possibility of a world-ending event happening again even in our lifetime is very real. The following were the closest we've ever come to all life being wiped out on planet Earth. Here are 10 times the world almost ended. One Russian soldier prevented World War III. Stanislav Petrov was the active officer at the Oko nuclear early warning station. The Oko used satellites to identify launches of ballistic missiles from the United States. In 1983, tensions were at an all-time high, and the system suddenly reported that 5 nuclear missiles were coming towards Russia. He knew that reporting this would lead to a full-scale Russian attack, launching upwards of 36,000 nuclear missiles. This, plus the US counterstrike of up to 23,000 missiles, would not have only destroyed both countries, but would have potentially killed over 2 billion people and disrupted the global climate enough that it may have never recovered. Without knowing for sure, he alone decided that it was a false alarm and did not report it. If he was wrong, he would have been executed and the world as we know it would have ended. The Ordovician Silurian extinction. 440 million years ago, at the very end of the Ordovician period, a dramatic climate shift caused sea temperatures to change, and 85% of all life in the ocean went extinct. This actually meant 85% of life on Earth, since this was roughly 15 million years before land animals even existed. For millions of years, 15% of surviving sea creatures struggled in their now harsh environments, and roughly 425 million years ago, they began evolving into the very first land animals like centipedes, millipedes, spiders, and other insects. This is considered the first mass extinction event, and almost completely ended life on Earth. It's even crazier to think that our genetic ancestors happened to be in that 15% of survivors. If they died, the lineage of creatures that would later evolve into humans would have ended. The Banilla Comet. On August 12, 1883, Mexican astronomer Jose Banilla saw hundreds of dark objects crossing in front of the sun. He managed to take a few pictures and showed them to others in the astronomy community, but they believed the objects were birds, not space objects like comets. It wasn't until 2011, 128 years later, that astronomy researchers at the National Autonomous University of Mexico concluded that the objects were actually fragments of a comet. They estimated that over 3,000 fragments passed by Earth over a span of 2 days, and some of them came within just 400 miles. That's a little more than the distance from Toronto to Montreal. One of those researchers, astronomer Hector Mantarola, theorized that if these fragments were to hit Earth, it would have killed every human on the planet. One bear almost caused a nuclear war. In 1962, at the Sector Direction Center in Duluth, Minnesota, a guard shot at what he thought was an intruder climbing the security fence. This one shot set off a sabotage alarm, which also triggered alarms at other nearby bases. Most bases hesitated and decided to check in with the Minnesota base before acting right away, but the Volk Field Air National Guard base in Wisconsin did not. When they heard the alarm, they assumed that World War III had started and ordered nuclear-armed F-106 planes to take off. After a call came in that the dark figure climbing the fence ended up being a bear, the pilots were ordered to stand down and were stopped on the runway. The Ice Age. We hear a lot about the Ice Age, and it did make for some fun animated movies, but we rarely stop to think about how close it actually came to wiping out humanity. The Earth has experienced many ice ages, but the most recent one, known as the Quaternary Ice Age, began around 2.6 million years ago and lasted until about 11,000 years ago. At its worst, ice sheets were roughly 2 to 2.5 miles thick. These locked away water and lowered sea levels by over 400 feet. Roughly 195,000 years ago, the global climate became so cold and dry that the human population plummeted to only 600 breeding individuals in Africa. Geneticists can tell this because the DNA of every one of the 8.2 billion people on Earth today can be traced back to one of those 600 people. The Chicxulub impact. Also known as the Dinosaur Killer, this asteroid hit the Yucatan Peninsula in modern-day Mexico 66 million years ago. You can even visit the 125-mile crater today. The impact killed every large dinosaur on the planet in only a few hours, and the rest didn't last longer than a few months. The large mixture of soot, sulfuric gases, and dust in the atmosphere completely blocked the sunlight for almost 3 years, and when plants couldn't photosynthesize the sunlight, they died and broke down whole food chains. Only 25% of every species on Earth survived, and since large predators died off, small mammals were able to thrive. According to a 2013 study, primates, including us, evolved from one small furry-tailed ancestor that resembled a shrew. So while this asteroid almost turned the planet back into a lifeless molten rock, we would not be here today without it. Thomas Midgley, the one-man natural disaster. Leaded gasoline was invented in 1922, years before we knew how poisonous it was. It's killed almost 5.5 million people per year until it was fully banned in 2021, almost 100 years later. Today, it continues to poison the air, water, and soil worldwide. In 1928, chlorofluorocarbons, also known as Freon, was invented for refrigeration and sprays like aerosol cans. Almost 50 years later, in 1974, scientists realized that it was the main cause of the 900 million square mile hole in the ozone layer. If that hole had not been found, it would have expanded enough to threaten all life on Earth. Leaded gas and Freon were both invented by Thomas Midgley Jr. of Ohio. He is credited as the one single organism in history with the worst effect on the planet. One microchip almost caused World War III. Zbigniew Brzezinski was the national security advisor to President Jimmy Carter, and on June 3, 1980, he received a terrifying warning. He was awakened at 3 a.m. and told that 250 Russian nuclear missiles were on their way to America. He knew that one call to the president would cause an all-out counterattack, so he waited to confirm the intended targets. Sitting alone in the middle of the night, Brzezinski chose not to wake his wife, thinking that everyone would be dead in half an hour anyway. Only 1 minute before he intended to call the president, military aide William Odom called to say that some warning systems were not reporting Soviet launches and that it was most likely a bug. Later, the Pentagon concluded that the false alarm was caused by one faulty microchip worth about 46 cents. 4581 Asclepius. On March 23, 1989, this massive asteroid passed the Earth roughly 425,000 miles away, which is almost twice as far from us as the moon. Geophysicists estimated that it was roughly the size of a mountain, and its impact would have been the equivalent to a 600 megaton atomic bomb. The tsunamis it would have created would have engulfed coastal cities, killing hundreds of millions of people almost instantly, and the darkness to follow alone would have caused mass extinctions. Scientists only knew about it 9 days after it passed us, so it would have been a complete surprise. After this, NASA launched the Space Guard survey that now finds and tracks 90% of near-Earth objects. And because of this asteroid, we now celebrate National Near Miss Day in the US and Canada on March 23rd of every year. The Permian Era Extinction. In what National Geographic calls the greatest natural disaster in Earth's history, the Permian era extinction wiped out 96% of marine life and 70% of terrestrial life, about 253 million years ago. It is the single largest mass extinction in history, and scientists now refer to it as the Great Dying. They recently concluded that it was caused by rampant volcano eruptions in what is now present-day Serbia. This released a large amount of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, which caused a greenhouse effect that baked the planet. The weather pattern shifted, sea levels rose, and acid rain beat down on the land. On land, almost every tree on Earth was wiped out, and in the oceans, it would take 14 million years for the coral reefs to rebuild to their former glory. But that's it. If you guys enjoyed this, please give it a like and leave a comment. And of course, if you want to watch more, there's clickable links on the screen right now, and you can add me to my socials. All the links are in the description. And I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.